Right, let's get some insight into the reactions to this verdict from our US-based journalist Don DeBar here live with us. Now, Mr. DeBar, Washington seems to be quite selective in responding to trials in various countries, reacting quite strongly to the Pussy Riot case in Russia, and yet keeping silent over the recent jail sentence for a prominent human rights activist in Bahrain. How do you explain this double standard?
It's a double standard. The United States has other double standards that bear on this case, too. First, let's look at the 1989 case at St. Patrick's Cathedral, where ACT UP members came into the church. About 45 of them were arrested before they could really voice their own protests. At numerous times since the beginning of the Iraq War around the United States, people have tried to go into churches to speak to the congregations. I know Nick Modern, for example, an activist in the United States, has done it about 30 times to try to say, look, your religious beliefs are so-and-so, what's happening violates them, please join us. And they've been threatened with arrest, arrested, and worse. So the United States does exactly this. And finally, in New York State alone, and this is true in all 50 states and federally, there is a hate crime statute that this action fits exactly into the parameters of, and what it calls for is sentence enhancement, so that, for example, if you were charged with criminal mischief for interrupting a church service or for some other, related violation, the penalties get stepped up as if you had committed a more serious crime. 3 years is not out of line with the New York State statute. So they are hypocritical across the board.
Now, the U.S. State Department says it hopes Russia will revise the verdict in the Pussy Riot case. Just how normal do you think it is for a foreign government to offer statements like that?
Well, that is the official foreign government's position, and there are geopolitical considerations, for example, Syria and others that I think are deeply involved. But there are also the unofficial spokespeople for the State Department, particularly Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, one of which is actually now run by Hillary Clinton's former chief of staff. I told your producer when they contacted me a little while ago to come on that I received 3 separate emails, bulk emails from Amnesty International about this Pussy Riot case. I didn't receive anything about the threat of the UK to invade the embassy of Ecuador in London. And as I was transmitting the 3 that I had received to the producer, I got another one from Amnesty International. So what's happening is the United States, for some reason that will become apparent later, is stirring this up to make Russia look as if it were a repressive, lawless state, while the United States, which has more incarcerated people than the next 3 countries on the planet, and that's only in absolute terms, in terms of relative terms, more than any other country on the planet. The United States has all these people in jail, and it's going to lecture other countries about how their legal process should work. I just think it has no credibility around the world, and I think it's shameful.
Washington also says that the verdict is disproportionate. Does it really have the right to give this kind of assessment?
Well, first of all, I'd be curious to see if they actually studied the case. I think instead that, again, geopolitical considerations are driving the statements that come out of there. Certainly it's not any concern for democracy or democratic rights because, as you pointed out at the very beginning, they would be screaming about the situation in Bahrain, which instead they are probably engineering because Bahrain, of course, is the home to their fleet in that area, the naval fleet.
Right. Now, what kind of reaction from Russia is the U.S. aiming at provoking with this strong response?
Well, I mean, either no reaction so that they can continue to turn up the heat in a public relations fashion against Russia, because I have a concern that as they moved from Cote d'Ivoire to Libya to Syria and eventually Iran, that they may well have Russia in their targets. I'm talking about U.S. senior policymakers, and they may well be softening the ground right now to try to show that Russia is hostile, the government is hostile to its own people, that it lacks legitimacy, etc. All of the things that they accused each of the other countries of as they moved their military forces in. That may be one thing. Another is that it presents a crisis for the Russian government in terms of it being an unsolvable problem, if you consider it a problem. Either they continue to do what they do and they continue to have this public relations campaign conducted against them, or they cave in, ceding part of their sovereignty, obviously, in front of the world and demonstrating by example that, hey, if you play this game with us, you'll win.